That's from Mr. Aney.
Mm-hmm.
And this, if you'll take, and it'll get.
I was reading in the introduction to this book, Reynolds Homestead, that Dr. Nanny Tilley put together, that when you were a child that you heard a lot of stories from your father about his family, and you recalled one in there that your Uncle Will had told you about the
Little Willie Reynolds.
owl, right? Were there other stories that were just that you heard over and over, or
I am not very good at relating any of those. I remember there was one about a rooster, for instance. I think we asked my father. Had those little red spots that you get when you're my age, his age. And we asked him, Daddy, where'd you get those? Well, he made up a delightful story about being in the hen yard and the rooster pecking him and, you know, all this kind of thing. But I don't remember the details. I remember what fun it was. And I suspect he told it different every time he told it. And I remember one time, this was before we moved out to Reynolda, at the townhouse on 5th Street. And I remember it was a thunderstorm. We were all scared, so we all jumped into Daddy's bed. And then he told us some wonderful tales, you know, and we completely forgot about the thunderstorm. So, but I can't drag up from my memory any details in the story.
but he was a storyteller too. Not a, sometimes I guess we think of fathers as being distant, but apparently he was.
Well, he was. You see, he was quite old to have started a family, because they didn't get married until he was 56, and he was 61 when I was born. And he was so delighted, I think, to have a family all of a sudden. It was sort of like a something really, really special to him. And so he took a great, my feeling, I didn't know him very long because I was only 8 when he died, but my feeling and recollection of him is that the pleasure he got out of having children, and in some of the pictures you can see that he's grinning from ear to ear when he picks us up, you know, laughing, and when they pull their hair, and so I have a very warm feeling about him. I have a little more distance from my mother in feeling, but I think some people relate more to men than to women, and I think I am. My children tell me I'm that way. I deny it, but they do tell me that.
What was your mother's background? I mean, what did her parents do? I know that she grew up in Mount Airy.
Yes, she did, and we used to go up there. She'd take us up there at least once a month to see them. She was the eldest daughter in the family, and Grandma had, you know, in those days, if you had TB, you were ashamed of it. You whispered it, and you made a secret of it, really. But she was in bad health, and I'm sure that's what she had. Very thin, very skin and bones. And she must have been ill. That's my only recollection of her, is that period. And Mother must have been really the head of the household. And she looked after her. She brought up her sisters and brothers. And one of her sisters, you know, is still living. You should interview her.
Maybe she's on the list, and I don't.
Ruth Lucas. She was. She's the youngest in the family, and she was up yesterday at a fair up in Reynolds Homestead, and she's much sprier than I am. She said yesterday she was 81, and I'm 70, and she can beat me any day. So. She had 5 children of her own.
So what did your mother's father do? What kind of business was he in?
I've asked, and of course by the time I came along he was elderly, and he really didn't work, but the way they say it was real estate. I think he was in farming, and I think he did buy a lot of land and sell it and things like that.
Had they always lived in Mount Airy?
Or in that section. And they knew the Siamese twins, you know, the first ones. They were great friends. Grandma had a chair for them where they could sit comfortably, one facing one way, I think, and the other way.
Is that right?
It was like a love seat type of thing. Only it was chairs. So yeah, where were they, John? Right in here, I think.
Probably so.
But didn't they face the opposite way?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Well, I've read books about them, and I can't remember either. But however it is, it was like an open thing that they could sit facing the right way, whatever it was comfortable for. So it must have been. Grandpa was. This would be in his retirement age. Would be when I remembered him. To me, he looked like Santa Claus. He just darling looking, white beard, and he had a very keen sense of humor. And so what he'd do is he would walk downtown every morning, and all the stores down there on the main street would buy for his sitting there because he always attracted attention. And they have comfortable chairs or rocking chairs out on the sidewalk for him to sit in hopes that he would sit at their store that day. And whichever one he chose to sit at attracted a crowd. And they'd stop and chat with him, you see, and he would tell jokes. And well, it was kind of a nice thing that doesn't happen today.
That's right. So because of his beard and his...
Well, he was very outgoing, and he was deaf when I knew him. But maybe that's why he had to talk so much.
So did you visit them alone, or was it...
No, we'd go up as a family. And, of course, in the early days, it took all day to get up there, and believe it or not. What is it, 45 minutes now? Well, there were no bridges. We had to ford the streams. And, of course, the cars were slower. And we were really going fast when we went 20 miles an hour. Dangerous speed. And I remember sitting, we always took picnic lunch, of course. And I remember one time we were sitting, and I even remember the date because I was confused as to what 1919 meant. I couldn't figure it out. I could tell you 19, 20, 21, 22, but what does 1919 mean, you see? And it was right after the war. And we had just forded a stream like that. And then we parked the car, or just stopped the car. I guess we didn't bother to park it. And was sitting along the side of the road having a picnic lunch. And along came a covered wagon and a mountaineer. And he had not been down from the top of his mountain for about 3 years. And he had something to sell down in Winston. Finally, I guess he would have come earlier if he'd had anything to sell. And he had not heard how the war came out. And he wanted to know, I remember asking Mother what had happened to the Germans, that German fighting. And that astonished me so that that's why it stuck in my memory. I couldn't have been more than, well, I don't know how old I was because my father died when I was 8. And that he might not have been living because he didn't go with us, you see. So I was somewhere in the pre-teen anyway.
Right.
Well, 1919, I know when it, sure, because I was born in 1910. Yes, my father had died.
Your mother went to what is now University of North Carolina at Greensboro.
It was called the Women's College.
What did she study there?
Chemistry, I hear.
Is that right?
Yeah. She never did anything with it that I know of. Well, I don't know why her interest was that, but and I don't know where that information comes from, but when we established the scholarships there, we felt it was important to have a special scholarship for chemistry. Somebody interested in chemistry, and we did that for several years.
So you have no idea where her interest in that would
No. I don't know what would make you interested in chemistry.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I can't figure that out.
She made all of her own clothes, you know, most of the time. And she made them. She enjoyed doing it. But for her wedding trip, of course, I think she had to when she was married. I don't think they really could afford to go and get anything fancy for her. Or she probably could have on her salary better than anybody else. And, well, Grandpa was well off. He had a big, nice, comfortable house, lovely house. So upset when the Mount Airy tore it down only 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I saw that in 1969.
Was that it?
I think so, when the books was.
And I wanted to try and save it like I have the Reynolds homestead. And they wouldn't have it for a library. Now I read occasionally how they're looking for land for the library or something else like that. But the reason I liked that old spot so much was it was 10 full acres right in the heart of Mount Airy, just up one hill and down in a valley and Main Street on top, say 2 blocks. And beautifully wooded, solid granite, all that country is. And it would have been someday Mount Airy's going to want an open space in town. And this would have been just beautiful for that. Right now, I suppose she doesn't need it, but I thought of it as library and open space. Am I getting in too many details for you?
No. What had she done after she graduated from college then?
Well, she came down here and worked for my father. She got a job with him. They were cousins. And, let's see, she didn't finish at Women's College. She went to Sullins, which I think is more like a finishing school. And I have I'm sure Reynolda must have it too, the yearbook of that year. And all right through it, Mother's president of this and president of that. And very serious, wonderful pictures. You haven't seen that?
No, not yet.
Well, you must remember to look that up. And because she's really quite rakish looking, but serious, serious-minded. And I guess that's a 2-year college. I guess she was at Women's only about 1 or 2. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
There was something I think it's in here that she left because her mother was ill or something like that. You see, because that's the same background. Well, anyway, she graduated from Sullins, and then they were married in 1905. And from the yearbook, you can tell how much time was in between. But she worked for my father as a secretary in between that time. Whether she went immediately to work for him, I don't know. And she, there's one story about her in the office. And she lived across the street from our townhouse with Mrs. Rich. And now Mr. Rich was treasurer of the company.
Did she board there?
Yes, she boarded there. And when my father was courting them, she had lots of those, and one would send chocolate candy, and one would send flowers. And my father sent her milk. And she thought that was the most. He was the most, she believed that was indicated that he was most interested in her health than any of the others. We wouldn't think that today, would we? She just had better sense than we have today. And then after she was, I remember another story when she first came to Winston. She got on the streetcar. A streetcar didn't run down 5th, it ran down 4th. And she was not used to streetcars. And the conductor came by and he said, "Fair lady." And she smiled and paid no attention. And he said it again. And then he was getting kind of cross about it because she just kind of bowed her head and looked out the window. And finally, Mr. Ed O'Hanlon, who later married a cousin of mine, and he had O'Hanlon's drugstore, still got the sign up there. And he stepped forward and he said, I'll be glad to do the honors. See, she had thought that he was saying fair lady to her, that she was pretty. So he said, then she blushed, of course, and realized what she'd been doing. Then the other story about her that you call was when my father finally proposed to her, and she had just won. She had entered a company contest as to who could write the best letter.
So this was an intra-company contest?
Uh-huh.
I had read about
and
that.
the tobacco
while I was
company.
working.
Who could write the best letter to for publicity or to sell? I think it was Camel, no, but it couldn't have been because that was later.
Maybe it was Prince Albert?
Prince Albert, it might have been.
I think that, I'm not
Because see, this
sure
would be
if it-
about 1904 or 5.
Right.
Mhm. And she won it. And then my father proposed, and she said she had no idea of marrying him. He was just marrying her for her money. And she'd won a $1,000 prize, I think was what it was. But that was a lot of money that day.
Had he chosen the winner of that by any chance? Did he choose the winner, or
The what?
did he choose the winner of that contest?
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I guess that was pretty unusual for a woman at the turn of the century to
Well, they were
make her way to
just
Winston.
beginning to do secretarial work. Otherwise, they had to do the domestic type of work to or teach.
Mhm.
They would, but there were very few opportunities open to women at that time.
Mhm. Did her parents support her in her decision? Do you know? Or
I don't know, but I never heard of any disapproval.
Mhm.
And of course, as you see, she was staying with people who were, the treasurer of the company and
Right.
well chaperoned. She wasn't really out on her own, you know.
Mhm. Do you remember what their wedding was like? Have you heard stories?
Well, they were married at 8 o'clock in the morning, so you can imagine. And we have the dress upstairs that she was married in, which was a navy blue suit. And the one that she'd made has a little fussy blouse.
Mhm.
But the train left at such an hour, early in the morning only. Just one schedule, so they had to make that. And I imagine it was just a few family and friends for breakfast, is what I imagine.
Mhm.
In this nice old big house. You could have accommodated them.
So where did they go on their wedding trip?
They went to Europe.
Mhm.
They went to New York and they went to Europe, and I think we have some postcards where she wrote her mother and father and so forth. They went to, I'm not sure just off the top of my head, but I'm sure they went to Vienna, and they went to London, and I'm sure they went to France.
Mhm.
But she bought some pearls in Vienna, and that's why I know she went there. And I think this she's got them on in the portrait out here back of the organ.
Mhm.
I think those two pictures were, I think, painted in France.
Is that right?
Mm,
So
I
while they
think
were
so.
over there?
Well, anyway, it was on their wedding trip. Whether it was done from a photograph later or painted in Paris, I don't know.
Mhm.
But I have a little photograph, a little colored photograph that was taken over there, and it must be around two somewhere. But I was wondering, it may be in the same dress, certainly the same style of dress.
Mhm. Now, when they came back, were they living on 5th Street then?
Mm-hmm. They lived there until Christmas of 1917,
Mhm.
and married in 1905, so that would make it 12 years.
Mhm. Now, did your mother continue working with him, or?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember that she kept going. I don't think that was customary at all in those
Yeah,
days.
I was wondering.
Yeah. But they had wonderful times in that old townhouse. My father had barbecues once a year for everybody that worked for him.
God.
And they had them out here once they got the lake going. And they had a big barbecue pit, and it was wonderful. We enjoyed it because the night before they were still cooking. They were cooking the pig, starting it and keeping it going all night long, and we'd come and inspect. And I think there, as I recall, about 500 people.
Wow.
It was a lot for a barbecue. And they were huge hogs that way. And then in the townhouse, every Halloween they had a wonderful Halloween party. And this would be for all the Winston socialites and everybody. And I remember one, Mr. Manley, who was a very prominent lawyer. It was the firm of Manley, Womble. It's the same firm, carried on. And he had, I think what people did was to start thinking about their costume a year ahead. And he had he was Robinson Crusoe. And he had sheepskin, so there's a soft side and a furry side. And he had, he was very daring. He had no shirt on. Imagine man in that. No shirt, and he had sheepskin, what do you call them, breeches? Well, anyway, they were shorts to us. I think they called them something else. And he had an umbrella with the smooth side of the sheepskin on the outside and the furry stuff inside. Well, we had that. He gave that costume to Mother. Everybody, of course, he got the prize. And we had it in our attic for a long time. I don't know where it disappeared. It's just a shame.
What were some of the other costumes that people? How elaborate would they be?
Very elaborate, I'm sure. And I only attended one, and that was the last one. So that would mean that I went when I was about 7. And I was Bo Peep, with a little bonnet thing. And little false curls were tucked into it. And, the little shepherdess hip thing. And I can't describe it because, I was just too excited at that age to. I don't even remember what Mother wore at all. But they all went to a great deal of trouble. This was the occasion. And, of course, we had prohibition in North Carolina. You could have, I think, 1 bottle a week. So all friends that did not drink would get that bottle for my father, so he'd pay him back, so that he'd have something to serve on an occasion like this. And he kept a wine cellar in Baltimore, and we transported it every time we went to Baltimore. There'd be 1 bottle in every suitcase coming home.
Now, did you have relatives in Baltimore, or was that business in Baltimore?
I think it was because, I think it was business. Because my father wanted to select a trust company. And to look after the trust that he wanted to leave all of us. And he looked at quite a few, and he decided on this one in Baltimore. It still is our banker. And so today I expect we would have used the Wachovia, but it was much smaller then. And I remember why he said that he liked that one was because they only dealt in trusts. They weren't trying to sell something as a banker to a trust that they held. Most of them, and today I think that this bank is also a bank too. But in that day and time, I guess that for so many restrictions, it's all right. But I mean, that's something I know nothing about, so I'm probably making a fool of myself now.
Can you describe what the 5th Street house looked like?
Oh, yes, I can describe every word of that house, because that was my first home, I was more impressive. Have you got any pictures of them?
I haven't. I just came in on Friday, and so I haven't had time to look.
Well, there are no pictures to show you upstairs, and there are no pictures to show you inside. But it was a very handsome Victorian, General Grant, or whatever we want to call it, with lots of turrets. And it was stone house and lots of porches. They were wonderful. And inside it was a very spacious hall. but it was a hall. It wasn't like a reception hall or anything. And then the usual parlor on one side and the library on the other. And then there was a music room in the rear. And of course, for a party, like this Halloween party, there were sliding doors so that actually the parlor and the library and the hall were all one room. And then also you could expand into the music room, which I think most houses didn't have it. This was not. And the dining room on the other side. And the kitchen beyond. And then we had a conservatory, which is like a little greenhouse with ferns and stuff. Oh, for one of these parties, they would enter the basement. And you had dummies or your stockings with sand in it, with cold, wet sand. And they would sort of made up like ghosts, or spooks or something. So and you touch the banister of the stairs and you got electric shock. So they really went to town. And upstairs with just nice rooms. My mother and father's bedroom was downstairs. And I remember that was the wall was covered in blue silk, pastel blue silk. And I think the furniture was more or less, I think that furniture was painted and in a pastel color and matched. See, today we don't usually do that, but it was matched furniture. In other words, your dresser matched your chair and your table and so on. And that's where in their room we used to congregate when the thunderstorms took place. We'd all get in the bed back there. And now in the music room, that had a beautiful covering too. I love that. It was a dark blue velvet on the wall instead of wallpaper. And I call it the library, but I honestly don't remember a book in it. But it was the family sitting room, and it had a nice a golden oak mantel, and it said, "Go east, go west, but aim is best." You know that old Scotch thing. And somebody owns that mantel today. I think it's Joe King.
Is that right?
Or he did own it. I think he owns it. I bought some things from the house, but it was torn down. It's a shame that house was ever torn down, because if Winston wants some museum of that period, which is what they should have, this was just a perfect house.
Because that's a
Because it could also have been used for something else.
In the city's history. And there's really not that much known about that part of the city's history as compared to, say, Salem has just been gone over and over, But so where did y'all play? Were the grounds big enough?
Well, you see, right next door to us was our aunt and uncle, Aunt Kate and Uncle Will. Now they had no children, but we were welcome to play in there. But beyond them was the Bowman Graves, and there were children across the street. So we all congregated, you see, and we played hide and seek or roller skate or something all together up and down the street. And then on the other side we had a square. We called it the square. And that's where the Bonson house is today. And that was wide open, and that was full playing. And I think that was fenced so that the young ones couldn't get out and run in the street. And next to that was the Lassiters, which my cousin Virginia Irvin was the daughter of that household. And the Lassiters came to live out here with us later. So we just stretched up and down the street. And down Spring Street was Aunt Lucy, and just a block away, the cousin, the Stedmans, and my Aunt Max, my mother's sister, married and across the road over here, diagonally across.
So it was sort of like a family village, right?
Yeah, and there were enough other people to. Mrs. I can name them all, but it's probably useless to do so. Just waste of time.
Go ahead. Who would you define as your neighborhood there?
Well, there was Mrs. Bidding. She was Aunt Kate's mother, and she was a fascinating-looking little old lady, all a little plump, but very little, and all sort of curved over. And of course, what I loved, I loved the peacock feathers. She had huge peacock feathers, and in a sort of an umbrella stand. she had loads of, like Victorian age, loads of little knickknacks. There was always some curiosity thing to look at. I don't recall that we went in too often into her house. I suspect she was too old and didn't encourage us. So it was very impressive when we did go. And then there was Mrs. Rich that I mentioned that Mother stayed with. And she died, and that was the first funeral I recall. We went
Is that right?
to see her body, and that was, I guess Mother had an idea we should get used to these things, but I don't approve of it myself. I think you can skip that in a child's education.
Was that a real devastating kind of thing?
It wasn't for me with Mrs. Rich, because I wasn't that fond of her. It was later when she insisted that we go look at our father. We got really my sister and I got quite hysterical over that. And I never looked at anyone since. Because I think it's awfully hard. It took me a long time to remember him alive. He was definitely dead then when I looked at him. And to bring him back alive was very difficult for me. Whereas my mother, I never did, because I realized I just temperamentally wasn't suitable, I suppose. And she never died for me. She remained alive. And maybe it was just as well to have let her die in some respects. But I don't think so. I don't see why it should. Now, where were we? Oh, Mrs. Rich. And then the second, he married again later. Very nice. And she later married Mr. Shore here. And so she, after Mr. Rich died, the second wife married Mr. Shore. And as a whole family then, she went on and had a family. And but I do remember that when she married Mr. Rich, she could buy anything she wanted to, but he could not bear to hand her money. He was just to give up money. He was stingy. It was a phobia with him. And she was really very unhappy about it, this second Mrs. Rich. And so she consulted Mother, and Mother thought she would try and get him to do something about it, but she didn't succeed. She wanted a hat. All right, go down and buy a hat. But she had no cash, nothing. She couldn't go down on the streetcar with a nickel, you see. And so what she ended up doing was to go and buy a hat, and then they'd charge him for 2 hats and give her the change.
So had your mother told her that?
I expect so. They worked it out together. Certainly she knew about it, or I wouldn't have known about it. I was just listening, big ears, you know. And, Dr. Johnson lived right around the corner from Miss Rich. And he was, when Mother first married and we all started coming children, she decided that Winston needed a top-rate pediatrician. That was just beginning to be things like pediatricians. And otherwise everybody was nothing but a general practitioner. And a top-rate surgeon. So she inquired of Johns Hopkins, Johns Hopkins Hospital. And they sent her, what she offered was that she would guarantee, I don't know how much the living expenses were expected to be for 2 doctors in that period, but if it were $10,000, which probably was a huge salary in that day, she guaranteed each of them $10,000 for the first 2 years. And that it would be less than that if, in other words, if they made 5, she would pay 5 on that. And that was so that they could get started. So she brought those 2 men. She brought Dr. Arthur Volk, a top surgeon, and Dr. Wingate Johnson. And he was a pediatrician and much more than that. And both of those men have stayed in Winston and been absolutely at the top of their profession all the time. They're both dead now. But Dr. Volk's son is Henry Volk, who is a top internist today in Winston. So, now where did, I got around, sort of sidetracked. Going around down the street. Well, let's see, I've done one side. You've got the Bowman Grays. Oh, we had a great big garden between us and Uncle Will. And the Bowman Grays were where the big Methodist church are. Yeah. And we used to have wonderful battles with them, my brothers did, in the barn. And my sister and I would run interference. So we were practically spies. The boys wouldn't hit us or strike us, you see. So we could go take supplies to my brothers.
So what kind of supplies would you be taking?
Rotten eggs. And all kinds of things like that. Now, oh yes, then the Cone family. And May Cone married Mardcastle, Kenneth Mardcastle. And the second generation, my niece, Katharine Babcock, married Kenneth Mardcastle II. So it goes on another generation, at least the neighborliness. Who else lived on that street? Oh, yes. Wait a minute. What were their names? Oh, shoot. I'll come back at it, but it'll come to me. One of the Northleets lived along there. And, yeah.
It's okay. What, did you ever go up to the tobacco factories with your father and was...
I don't remember. I think I was in his office several times, but I don't remember going through. But he used to bring those, in those days we used to make those little bags, we'd string them, that you put pipe tobacco in. And you had to run a cord in the top. And that was a wonderful job for us. And we made some money. We made some money with it. And
so would you do that at home?
Oh, yes. And I think the whole operation was at home. In other words, if you wanted to make some extra money and you were black, you could do the same thing. You know, you just took us at home and brought them back and were paid for finishing so many. Oh, John Carter, who was our major domo here, he came back to work for my father from the factory. My father needed some kind of attention. I think Mother was making him wear nicer clothes or pressed clothes or something like that, and shoes polished rather than sloppy around. And so he brought back with him to work in the house. Well, first of all, John, he worked at the factory, continued in the daytime, but he'd come and work at night for about an hour, you see, to valet my father. And then later he gave up his job and he came back as butler. And he lasted right through our move to Reynolda, my sister's move to Greenwich. He came up there with him. He taught Harvey, whom you've met, everything Harvey knows. And you get Harvey to talk about him because he can.
Well, how had John Carter, coming from tobacco factory work, who trained him to take care of a house?
Well, he was smart, and he just learned. I don't know. I suppose anybody over him said, "This, you're not doing that right. You do it this way." And I don't think he could read or write. But even when he was in Greenwich, got his driver's license, and they knew he couldn't read or write, but he could read enough to say that's a stop signal or that's a curve signal or something like that. He'd learned those kind of things that were practical. And he really bossed all of us, particularly after Mother died. I mean, we'd tell us what to do. I mean, he ran the house, and that was it. And he made out the menus with the cook's help. And his wife Marjorie was a cook a lot of the time. She was a college graduate.
Is that right?
2-year college. She went to. Can you name any colleges?
Bennett, perhaps, or
I thought of Bennett, but I think it doesn't begin with. Isn't there another one with a B? Two words, I think.
I can't think.
Oh, that's
Maybe
another thing I can remember. Have to think of later.
Okay.
But
Now, did she come to work at the same time that he came to work? Or?
well, she didn't start that early. I think she came to work for the first time out here, and she worked as a laundress at first, and then she later, I think it was when my sister was running the house, that she worked as a cook. And she was an excellent cook. I remember she was wasted doing the laundry because she was too good a cook to otherwise. And then she stuck right at that.
Did they, well, okay, back at the 5th Street house, did John Carter live there in the house once he
No,
came
you
there
know,
full-time?
it's a habitual thing here in Winston. I don't know where else in the South, but they don't like to live in. And you'll find none of these houses have servants' rooms. And I remember it was difficult when Mrs. Mother had visited several times at Biltmore in Asheville, and Mrs. Vanderbilt came back here to visit, and she brought a maid. It was great to do what to do with her because we had no space for her. And every one of the second floor bedrooms were used by all of us. I suppose we could have squeezed in together or something, maybe done something like that. And I think they finally fixed the attic up for her. I'm not too sure, but there's no bathtubs there. So anyway, it was quite a problem. And here, what they had was that one house there where the Babcock Foundation is now. That was the servants' house, and if they were tired and wanted to sleep here, they could. They'd go down there at night. If they had to get up early in the morning, if we were doing something we had to get off early, they would sleep there. But they liked to live at home. So they all, generally speaking, lived at home.
Let me turn this over while okay, we were talking about that John Carter came out here too, is that right? Were there other servants in your household on 5th Street? And
yes, there was one wonderful one named Savannah Jones, and she was a millionaire in her own right, land on paper. And she used to have, he was, well, I guess it was her husband was, but he owned and he bought and sold land and things like that. And he really stacked it up. And they had a nice house, and she had help of her own, but she get bored to death. So she'd come in and work for a while here. And she sewed beautifully, and Mother, as I said, loved to make dresses, so Savannah was the one in charge of that. She worked at the 5th Street house, too. And later, Mother had a maid, who was the chauffeur's wife's sister. And they lived down here in one of these cottages. And she was the one that did the sewing. She was Almeda. She was very beautiful, so a very sweet person. And let me see, who else was around? Pluma, Pluma, and her husband worked for Uncle Will as chauffeur. And she was an excellent upstairs maid, and she stayed in the family for ages. And she went later, when we all got married and things like that, she went over to my brother and his wife, Blitz. And then, but we kind of split up the help, you see, to each of us took some, except I got on the I didn't need enough help at the time, so I missed out. I didn't get anybody. But I did have a cook come up when I was first married to stay with me a month.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't a Reynolda cook. She was an old Salem cook, but it hadn't worked out yet.
Mm-hmm.
So she came and got me started in New York, and then I had to be on my own after that.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's see who else. Plymouth, Alameda, and Savannah. Now I would say Alameda was not in the townhouse.
Mm-hmm.
She came after Reynolda. So in the townhouse would be Plymouth and Savannah and John. We had a chauffeur, but he was white. His name was Robert Holden. And he's, I think, in one of the, and then later we had, out here we had, no, Bob Gibson wasn't a chauffeur. He was an electrician, that's right. He lived in one of the houses down here. But Bob Holden's pictured in that car where, when you come across it, it's a mother standing with Dick, our eldest brother, and my father standing there, and there's a maid there with them. And they're touring somewhere. And I think, I don't know what kind of car it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had, Mammy Lula was another one. And she was like a nursemaid.
Mm-hmm.
She took us in hand. And then we had, for nurses, we had, Mother had some kind of a heart trouble. And I think today, I've heard doctors say it sounds like it could have been rheumatic fever that was not diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she had children, it was quite a strain on her. And she had my sister, and I was expected. And the doctor was, I guess it's about that time that it was developed, or was noticed. And so they sent down a trained nurse to be with her during my birth, and before. She came down a couple of months ahead. Well, Mother liked her so much, and we all got along so well. She stayed on, but she was a graduate nurse. And we called her by the nickname Bum, B-U-M. Her name was Henrietta Vandenberg, and I suppose as children can get Berg and Bum about as close as they can get.
Now, where did she come from?
From Baltimore and Johns Hopkins University, the School of Nursing.
Mm-hmm.
And her father, well, she was a very important member of our household. Her father was vice president of Holland American Shipping Line. And they had lived in Holland and had been sent over to be residents over here for the shipping company, and were located in Baltimore, Maryland. And she was from a large family. I think there were 10 of them. She was the youngest. Mm-hmm. And she stayed with us so many years, and she used to come back. Every time I had a baby, she came back to stay with me for a month.
Is that right?
And I've kept up. She's dead now. She died in 1951. But I've kept in touch with her family, her nieces. And we don't see each other to an extent, but we correspond mostly at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's see. So, and under her, she was charged of all of us children.
Now, so what kinds of things could she tell you to do, as opposed to how was her role different from your mother's role?
Oh, she bossed my mother. And she called Mother Dearie. But Mother was pretty strong-winded, you know. And I think a little jealous sometimes of Bum, because she did have so much influence over us. It sort of, but Mother had so much to do that she couldn't have done it, you see. It was really too much for her. Maybe in this day and time she would have, but the way they treat wonderful, the way the children now look after their own and do everything else. She had a Scotch nurse maid. We call that a nursemaid. See, she would be the governess nurse, I suppose. And the Scotch maid was Lizzie, her name was, Lizzie Thompson. And I don't know whether she was imported or what, because after she left us, she stayed a long time. she went back to Scotland, and I don't think she'd worked for anybody else, so she may have just come over for one job and went back to Scotland. But she was kind of jolly and not as well educated, you know, but she'd take, she'd do whatever a bum told her to, Miss Vandenberg to her. And I want to see if I can remember. Of course, I suppose we had laundresses. I can't count them up because I'm not too sure about all the people in it. Savannah was not all the time. She was just part-time. And out here we had some night watchmen too. We had, I would say Pluma and one other maid upstairs. And we had John Carter and one other man here. And then you had the cook and she had a helper, that's 6. And then you had a laundress. Now, whether she had a helper or not, I don't know. So, but say 7. And you had a night watchman on. Now, whether he did any cleaning or not, I don't know. The chances are we had somebody cleaning besides John, and later Harvey was with him, but John and whoever it was.
So could you describe, again, like when you were a child, and what your day would be like who would get you up, who would dress you, and who would you see during the day, and what would your activities be?
Well, the school was right down the hill, so it really was very. And of course, I'm beginning at the period when I was independent to a certain extent, and I was older, and I don't recall anybody waking me. Somebody must have. It would have been Lizzie or Bum, if so. But I think Bum had left us. She left. She went to Fort Dix in the war, right about the time of the flu scare. Wasn't that 1918? I think
so.
And the flu came right after she'd left, and it was very, her mother was very strict about things like that. And unfortunately, she sent up for one of my father had already died. She sent up for one of my father's nurses he'd been in the hospital in Philadelphia. And she came down on the night train, and she came down with flu. I had the flu at the moment. I was the first one down, my brother Dick and I. And she came down, and she had caught flu. Whether they kept telling us now she caught it on the train, but I don't know whether she caught it from us or on the train, but she died in 4 days.
Oh, gosh.
And Bum had already left, you see. So, what did Mother do? She was very strict about everybody had to put their hands in this alcohol outside. You had to wear an apron, just like if you went in the operating room. So we didn't spread things. And the others got it later, but they didn't get it from Dick and me, because it was too late for that. That was when everybody went around with the mask on, and they would squeeze a spray on there. Everybody was going down the street, with a spray, and you wouldn't speak to anybody. You stand off and spray. But it was really frightening. It was quite I don't think we've had an epidemic. Even the, what do they call it? The thing in Philadelphia recently.
That Legionnaires disease?
Yeah, well, that wasn't really, it didn't make the to-do. There were really very few figures in that. Well, this just spread straight through the whole country. Everybody. I mean, there might be 1 person out of 10 that was skipped.
How long did you have to stay in bed when you were sick?
With that? I don't remember that. I remember scarlet fever. I had every disease that came around, but I think it makes you stronger. I had things you don't have today. I had diphtheria, scarlet fever. Nobody ever has that. I didn't have smallpox, no. Mumps, of course, and measles, and German measles, and other kind of measles, and whatever else. Whooping cough, I had that. What else can you have?
I think that's about chicken pox or.
Yeah, oh sure, I had that. I didn't have polio. I think I got sidetracked. I think we were talking about something else. What were we?
Oh, just like your typical day, like.
Typical day.
Yeah.
Well, run down as soon as you got up. You had breakfast, and.
Now, would you be eating together with your brothers and sisters, or would your parents be there at that time, or?
Well, actually, I think I'm remembering later when. Mother had breakfast upstairs. And I know I was scolded many times because I forgot to go kiss her good morning. But a couple of times I'd go and she was still asleep, so that was always my alibi. But I know she got quite upset with me because I'd go out of the house without kissing her goodbye. And so anyway, I think I'm thinking of more of when I was in the 6th and 7th grades. And by that time, my brother Smith was here. My brother Dick was off at school, and my sister Mary was off at school. She went off to boarding school. And Smith and I were here, and Elizabeth Wyeth was here with me. Now, she was Elizabeth Liebert, and her father owned the farm across the river from Uncle Will. And he was Uncle Will's nephew. And that was quite a distance in those days to come back and forth to school. And they had just moved out there. They had lived formerly at Westview, where all the houses are built there in Westview, Westview Drive. And that was their farm, and Uncle Will's farm. They worked for Uncle Will at that time. And then they moved out with their own farm out to the river. And so it suited everybody. For Liv and I were very good friends. I'm staying with her now. And for her to sleep in 5 days a week with me, keep me company. So she did. She moved in, and I remember arguments that Smith and Liv and I would have. We'd stay up real late at night. Nobody seemed to care about it. But, I guess... I think I'm muddling this a little bit. I think that was after Mother died. It was. If Mother would have died by this time that I'm thinking of. And the Lasters were living here with us. We have quite a tradition in the family that, somebody looks after the orphans in the family and really puts themselves out. Now, when the Lasters, the Liebert family, rather, they were orphaned early, young. Well, my father wasn't married. Uncle Will and Aunt Kate were. But the two brothers and Aunt Kate took those Liebert children under their wing, and there were quite a lot of them. Now, they always felt that Daddy, my father, was he was the one they loved, you see. And Aunt Kate always bossed them a little bit, and she didn't understand children, neither did Uncle Will. So I know how they felt, but they resented that then. But they still had to, she was the only woman in the group, you see. And, but if they had a fight, they'd come to Daddy. And they lived more or less with Aunt Kate and with my father. Between them, they did it. I suppose they left Aunt Kate, they'd come to my father's if they really got mad. And so here we were, orphans. I was 14 then. And one of our best friends was Mrs. Laster was a Liebert. She was the oldest Liebert. And so she took us under her wing. And they literally moved. She moved her family and everybody here. And she had a much younger daughter. She had one daughter married who didn't move. And then she had Virginia, who was my age, and we were very close. And then she had a little daughter, about 6, she was 6 years old. And Bobette Haynes, Alasta Haynes, lives here in Winston. And so I think I've skipped over in my mind and gotten that kind of thing. You want it back further. Well, I remember always having a dog. Some dog would pick me up. It was not my dog, but I guess I fed him some of my lunch. We have lunch down there at school. And one of the dogs was we called Little Friend. Mon Petit Tommy, we were studying French. And Little Friend would come, just follow me home. I don't know who it belonged to, and it wasn't a full-bred dog. I spent a lot of time with the dogs. And I had cats. And I read all the time. Rode horseback all the time. I think we rode almost every day, even when I went to high school. And
who had taught you how to ride?
We didn't have any lessons. We got on. But there was a groom down there that would ride with us sometimes. And Mother had a beautiful house. Oh, she was so lovely, with a Kentucky Belle. And she was the only good house. Well, there was one other house that was pretty good. And after she died, I had my eyes on Kentucky Belle, and my stepfather gave her to me. So she was mine after that. She was a single footer. She had that. My other house had been called Splinter. I could chip off the old block kind of thing. And he had been trained to harness, if you like. In other words, he could be hitched up to the plow. And he was pretty good. He was a good one to learn on. You know, nothing fancy about him, but you could stick on him. Kentucky Belle would give me a little more trouble. She'd more likely run away.
So how young were you when you first started riding?
I don't remember, but Mr. Wharton was superintendent of Reynolda. And he started off riding with us, but he didn't give us any lessons. But he was there. He was along there. Oh, yes, and you like this one. We saw a movie at that time. It was Henry VIII. And the ladies were riding horseback, and they had these beautiful little hats and a plume like this. Well, I got myself a plume, and I would ride all over. Not a hat that looked as nice as these hats, but just an ordinary hat. And then I sewed a plume on, so I would do this. And of course, I was really being the age of knighthood, really. There was a group of us that would go. I was supposed to be 4 or 5 horses, that's all. But we have wonderful places to ride. One of the best things that, you know, is so grown up now, you couldn't. The place was big enough, though, then. We would go this, it was a lake drive all the way around the lake. And where the Old Town Club is, that was sort of on the hill above the lake drive. And then you could go out over about where the Coliseum is, and then you off the place. But all that whole section belonged to Reynolda. And of course, you could stay on the road up there just a little way, and come back in where Wake Forest is. That was part of Reynolda. And get more ways of riding. Then also over really on, you know where Stratford Road is? And Robin Hood Road. We'd go, well, we'd cross, I guess you just cross Reynolda Road, and that's about all you had to do. You see where the grays are was our sheep pasture. So we would go in there, where the sheep were, and then we come out Robin Hood Road, and we go right, and we go all the way around and come back Polo Road. And those were all dirt roads. And that was a good long ride, I mean. But there was a nice store. We could stop and get an orange crush on the way.
Now, where was that store on Reynolda?
No, this would be leaving Reynolda. We would have left Reynolda and the sheep. Well, the Bowman Grain now. And but still, there were country roads. no houses, no suburban houses, and dirt roads. And I think that you always had to have time to do that one. I think that was a good 5 miles.
Where did you start when you entered school? Where did you start going to school? That would have been before.
It was before. Yeah. Well, we went down to Old Salem, and we went to the first grade down there, Salem Academy. My brother says that he's an alumni of that. And, it's a girls' school, but you took boys too at that time because there was no other. I guess there was no other private school.
Can you remember? Do you have fond memories of school, or did you like school?
I enjoyed it. Well, we had down there. I only went 2 years down there, and then we had Reynolda school. So we were in I believe I was only. Yeah, I think I was there 2 years. Maybe only one. Miss Sally Fole, I think her name was, and she was a teacher. And she was quite elderly, dried up little old lady. And she'd been one that had been lost getting married by her. You know how they draw lots for those? They used to. And she'd drawn a lot for a man that she didn't want to marry. So if she refused, she could no longer get married. If he refused, she refused. He could then draw in the next lotting for another wife. But she was a little old maid, and I remember she made her own soap. No, she was making paste. That's what she was doing. On the stove in the middle of the room. And I remember it smelled wonderful. I enjoyed it. I don't know how you make paste today. I think you use some lard. I don't know what makes it sticky. I've forgotten how to make it. And we were driven to school. That was when we lived in the townhouse. And then I think Mother had the school started out here by the time we came out here.
Now, how big was this school out here, the Reynolda school?
Well, we were county school as well as private fairs. And it would be about half and half. And I remember in my class about 6 girls, maybe 7, and 6 boys.
Now, did the people from the county also have to pay?
No. But what the county did was the county gave Mother an allowance of what they closed the county school. In other words, Mother went in the business of county school, public school. And so if they had an allowance of so much money per year for the school, it was paid in, and Mother paid for the rest of it. And she got better teachers, so she lost money on the deal, but they paid their share. So we had the farmers' sons that lived around here, the tenants. And it made it very interesting for us. It was much nice. And then we had the same people that, it happened there was one girl that was a farmer's daughter. And we must have been 7 girls. And 6 of us were very close friends, and are still. And that's Elizabeth Lineberg, and Virginia Lassiter, that we talked about, living here with her mother, and Elizabeth Haynes, and Tippy Galloway, and Aurelia Spall, who was Aurelia Plumney. That's 5, and me. I make 6. And actually, the boys were kind of slow for us.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we were much brighter than they were. But it taught us patience. But I would say, for one thing, well, it was public school, really. But I always do learn slowly. Now, whether that affected me, whether I would have learned quicker, I don't know. But I'm very painstaking. But we had excellent teachers. Mother got Thompson teachers. And we taught French too, which they never would have had. I don't think the boys cared whether they did or not, but it was a good experience.
So how old were you when you started learning French? I guess much.
They started in the 4th grade.
Wow.
And it was just a little bit. It just got you a little feeling of it with bonjour and a few things. How are you this morning? But still, you got the feeling of it.
Were there ever any cleavages between the people who lived around Reynolda Village and say the kids who came from outside?
I don't think so, but you were chummier with the people that you were accustomed to being with. But we all got along fine. There was no people weren't rebelling then like they are. They showed a great deal of respect, They treated you nicely, and we all attended that school. I attended from the second grade on up through the 7th till I went to high school. And I went to the Reynolds High School, And we all did. Well, some of them went off right away after this. But, let's see, Aurelia, Liv, and I think 3 of us went to the high school and 3 didn't. And I was very anxious to finish high school. I was in my junior year. And I just said a little while ago, Uncle Will did not understand people, or children. But I think 3 of the girls got pregnant that I didn't even know. And Uncle Will heard about it, and by gum, he wasn't going to let me go there again.
Now, this was 3 girls in your class, or?
No, I don't know whether in my class. I think it was just in the high school.
Just in the high school.
At least I didn't know them. If they'd been in my class, I'd have known them. And so he was not going to have me go to that school any longer. Well, that really upset me. I'd just been elected, what was I elected? Secretary, I think, of the senior class. And I wanted to graduate there and so forth and so on. So, no way, I had to go off. Now, we had, of course, I made an offer year the next year for me because we went to the strictest boarding school you can imagine. You wore a uniform and just looked terrible and felt awful.
And where was this?
At Rosemary Hall in Greenwich. Has Mary Martha, I probably told you this before, that I'd just gotten to the point where I was set away from high school because of people I didn't even know who were pregnant. And Rosemary was very strict, very good school. I mean, I sat in the Latin class. I made good marks. I sat in the Latin class at Rosemary, and Miss Retrice was the head of the school, and she taught Virgil. I was ready for Virgil, according to the high school. I did it for 1 week. I said, I can't take this. She was just talking in Latin the whole time. I was not up to that. And so I said, I'm just not ready. I'd like to go back a year. Well, they were kind of stupid because once I had asked to go back, they put me. They had bright ones and slow ones, and they put me in the slow group. Well, as I said, I'm a slow thing, but maybe it's because I've always dealt with slow. I'm slow to learn. At least it takes me a long time to read a book. Because I really do it thoroughly. I'm used to, and that is if I'm studying. So, what they do, they really put me back. And the only thing I really repeated was Latin. But they thought for sure I was going to run away.
I thought you did run away.
Oh, that was from home.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't even gotten that. It was in the summer.
Well, was it real obvious that you were upset at the circumstances under
Well,
which
I'm
you
sure
lived
the
there?
family must have said, now Nancy does not want to come to Rosemary. She wants to stay home. And I believe I had run away the summer before, so that's why they thought I'd run away again.
Where had you run away from?
Well, I was invited up to Saranac Lake to visit a friend of mine who was local, Nona Haynes. And
That Nona Porter's mother or grandmother? Mother.
And Mr. Haynes had TB. And he was living in an entirely different house from us. His children were up there with him. His wife was up there. And no, I couldn't go. I might get TB, says my family. So I, unfortunately, had already told Nona I was coming. So I decided I'd better go. And with the help of Elizabeth Lyberg, Wyatt today, she had to drive me to the station. And I had to say, I told the family, they were all up at Rowan Gap, and I said, I'm going to stay with Liv tonight. So thinking I would get... No, I didn't say that at all. I wrote down exactly. Somebody was supposed to pick me up, and I said to them I was going to stay with Liv. But after that, I did give them a note to take with them to be opened up there. And in the note, I said exactly what I was going to do. I said, I'm catching the train, and I'm going up to see Nona, and I'll stay 2 weeks, and then I'll be home. And, boy, I can see what happened. And Liv put me on the train, then she took my car and brought it back out here.
And how old were you then?
Oh, I was 15, 16. Sure, I could do it all right. I mean, you know, those days, a girl didn't go out without a chaperone. Till she was about 21, she didn't go anywhere. And, stop for a minute.
Yeah, that you had to be chaperoned.
Mm-hmm. But what happened was, when they got my note, they just hit the ceiling. And they got on the telephone to the bankers in Baltimore. And one of those poor dears, one of the vice presidents, had to meet my train. And get on my train in Baltimore. See, I had passed through Baltimore about 4 o'clock in the morning. So the next morning, because I didn't know what was going on, all this stuff. But the next morning, I went in the dining car. I got breakfast. And I looked over, and here was Mr. Hubner. Well, I knew Mr. Hubner very well, so he hadn't seen me. But he was sitting way down there, and he ordered. And I thought, uh-oh, I'll bet he's here after me. And I thought, well, I got to meet him sometime, so I spoke to him on the way out. He didn't look up. I don't know why. I said, hello, Mr. Hubner, and he said, oh, hello, Nancy. And he said, now, where are you sitting? And I told him, and he said, well, I'll be along a little while now. See you. So he came along. I had time to think over this situation, and he said that they had sent him up here to hold me until Ed Johnston got up. Now, Ed Johnston was my stepfather, and he was also one of my guardians at this time. My mother had gone. And Ed wanted him to hold me, to keep me from going to Saranac until he got here. I said, okay.
You weren't in New York yet, you were on the way.
We're still on the train. And so he left me and went up to get his bags. And we stopped at Manhattan Transfer. And I thought, well, if I want to light out, I can do it again. They can't catch me this time. And I thought, oh, to heck with it. Let's just, let's face it now instead of later. So I did. I waited. And I felt so sorry for those two men because they couldn't do anything with me. I just knew what I wanted, and I was going to do it, and calm and collected about it. And so, meanwhile, we'd missed our train. So he did contact Ms. Haynes and say that I was delayed a day, and I'd be up the next morning. But Ed Johnston felt he had to go with me all the way. And the two of them felt they had to entertain me that night. So they took me to the play called What Every Woman Knows Is Barry. And they were so embarrassed because they thought it was naughty, you know. And well, I don't know what is naughty about that, because in those days it was. And I could see the embarrassment, and I was having a great time. They were so embarrassed. And I would howl with laughter at everything, whenever I was supposed to. But they took me up, Ed took me up and spoke to Miss Haynes and then came back. Now, she didn't know anything that was going on at that time. And unfortunately, somebody told her later. And she blamed it on Cousin Nancy Lasser. And she never forgave Cousin Nancy for stopping me from coming to her. And in fact, I went over about a year ago. She just died, Mrs. Will Haynes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I hadn't seen her in years, and I went over to see her about a year ago. And we...
No, she just died a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read it in the...
Nona's grandmother.
That's right. And she hadn't changed a bit, though. I hadn't seen her in 20 or 30 years. And I went over to see her. About a year ago. And we didn't really touch on it, but... I should have explained, but I thought, well, maybe she's forgotten, but she probably didn't.
So I guess that's a pretty unusual act of rebellion. I mean, did they sort of expect that from you?
Well, they did after that, yeah. They blamed it on Lib Liebert. They said it was her bad influence on me. Lib got the beating, so to speak. It was a shame, but they did. They blamed it on her.
Well, do you think the fact that you were close friends, that did help you sort of cook up?
Well, she had a reputation of being a kind of rebellious, you see. Revolt. And I don't know where she got that. I'll have to ask her if she can recall anything that gave her that reputation. But
she's still that way.
Yeah.
She still does her thing.
Yeah, but is she really revolting now, do you think?
Well, I mean, she's still very opinionated and does what she thinks is important. And doesn't do the things that aren't. And she'll tell you in a minute.
Well, because she had a wonderful time putting me on the train and being a part of this.
She loved every minute of it.
Sure she did. So I didn't feel very sorry for her when she got all the blame.
Do you remember Ms. S. Clay Williams?
Yes, very well.
And
she was a good friend of my mother's.
Were they the same age?
I think they must have been contemporaries. Is she still living?
She's still living, and we're going to interview her this summer.
Well, now, Mother was born in 1880. So Mother would have been 100 years old this year.
Well, now she must be young, because she's about 95.
Did you say she's about 9?
Well, then she's about 5 years younger. Mother, Mrs. Bess Plumley, which she's gone. Miss Galloway was a great friend of hers. But some of these were younger.
Alec Galloway's mother?
No, this was Tippy. Tippy Galloway's mother.
Okay.
Ida Galloway. And Mr. Bob.
Now, who is still living besides Mrs. Williams and...
That Mother's contemporaries? It couldn't be anybody, you know.
Mrs. Wommel just died. Was she a contemporary? She was pretty close.
I don't know.
So Aunt Ruth would be the oldest person.
Well, if you've got Mrs. S. Clay Williams, but can she...
Well, okay. Well, we were going to see...
my Aunt Ruth, my mother's sister, is 81. And she was yesterday. She was with us. And
then it comes to your generation with you, Mary Martha, and Liv. Anybody else?
Gee, we waited a little late for all of this, didn't we?
Yeah. Virginia Irving would have been a good one.
Mary Martha's good. Mary Martha's older than we.
We got her down. Mary Martha's over 70?
Oh, yes. I bet she's almost 80.
Mary Martha's almost 80? That's incredible.
Well, let's see. Liv's a little older than I. And then you got David, and then you got Mary Martha. Mary Martha was the oldest in her family. All you have to do is look.
That's incredible.
But Mary Martha said she was 81. Are you through?
Yeah, why don't we stop for today?